Okay, welcome to a tutorial for photographers, beginning photographers in my grade 12 photography class. This is an introduction to Photoshop. If you have no background in Photoshop and you're not sure where to get started, this is just a very quick introduction to the interface, which means the where stuff is in this software. So first of all, Photoshop looks like this. So you're looking for this icon here, the PS Photoshop icon. There are a couple different versions. This is CS6. Doesn't really make a big difference there. For the most part, what we're going to be using will be either CS6 or CC or some variant of that. Not a big deal. They all kind of look the same at this point. There are just a couple of variations in tools as you go through the different versions, but let's just take a look at what we have here. Okay, so off the top, you're going to see that you've got some menu items here. Now, the thing about Photoshop is it's just massive. It is just an incredible program, chock full of options and tools and palettes. Each one of these things has just got a ton of different ways to do things. There's just a lot here, and having used this program for over 10 years now, I still don't know, half of it. It's massive, even a quarter of it. So it's huge. And so let's take a look at what we see here. So the first thing we want to do when you open up Photoshop is I'll be running tutorials, or if you're watching a video that I've created, I'll always use the Essentials workspace. What that means is you've got this is customizable, so I can move things around. I can decide that I want to open this up because I might need it for something later, and I want it to be readily accessible. And so you can customize your interface, and you can see that these things are changing depending on how I want to use the program. Well, if I'm doing something like I'm using a swatch here and you can't find it, that's going to be frustrating for you. So what I tend to do is I reset my workspace. So what you'll see here in the top right corner here, there's this drop down with a bunch of different workspace presets, and that can also be found here under Window, Workspace. Okay, there's a bunch of presets here, and then you can of course customize yours as well. But for now, what we're going to do is we're just going to go. This is the Essentials workspace, and I'm going to reset the Essentials workspace. What you see is it sets everything back to the default position. It puts back all the default tabs and tools. Everything's where it was to start. So I'll always do that so that if you're looking for something, you'll know where to find it. Notice that there are a bunch of other ones, and when I change to motion or I change to typography, these are all updated. All the palettes are updated based on the tools I'm going to most likely use. Okay, because there are a lot of them, and these are just shortcuts. A way you can get all of this through these menus, but oftentimes we find it's easier to use these palettes. Okay, all right. So let's go back to Essentials, and I'm gonna just for good measure reset that. Okay, so that looks okay right there. A couple things that we want to note. We've got a tool palette here. Okay, this can be a 2 or a 1 column palette depending on how you prefer it. Okay, these little double arrows here mean that things expand and contract, and you'll see those in a couple other places as well. Okay, these I mentioned that these are called palettes, so you can see there's a color palette, a swatch palette, and adjustments, styles, layers, channels. All of these are palettes, and each of these can be dragged off of the dock. We call this a dock. So if you think about a boat floating in the ocean, right? It's floating by itself, and then when we want to bring it back over to shore, we dock it, and so that's the same terminology. We dock that, and as I say, you can maximize and minimize and undock items that you use often, and then use your interface the way you'd like. Reset that. Okay, so that's the palettes. We've got tools here. Now we also notice is for some of these tools, there's a little triangle, this little white kind of triangle at the bottom, and what that means is that there's another set of hidden tools that are related to this one. Okay, not all of them have them. This one doesn't have it. Okay, so there's no extra tools here, but this selection tool here, that's got a number of other selection tools related to it. This is another selection tool here. Again, there are more here, and the way you get it is by just clicking and holding, and then you'll get that drop down there. So sometimes what you're going to find is if I'm working on a tool, perhaps I'm working on the this is the magic wand tool here. So I'm working on the magic wand tool, and your interface doesn't have the tool that I do. It could just be that yours is set to the opposite one. You'll notice that the default changes depending on what I've last used. Right, so I'm doing some work over here, and this reflects my last use of this tool. So just be aware of that. As you get kind of better with the software, you'll know where things are, and I'll try and point them out when I remember. But just know that there are some hidden tools kind of hidden under these. Okay, all right. As I said, that there are some again items along the top here. Okay, these menu items. The ones we're going to look at right now, they again have to do with these palettes. So I mentioned I'm going to show you some of the more kind of really important ones. So layers is a good one. We'll talk about what layers do. Basically, they are like overlays, and they're a good way to keep organized. This is one of the ones that's probably most important for us. It's called the history palette. Okay, and what it does is it remembers sort of your last 20 kind of steps or moves. So say I make a selection and I drag the selection, you'll see that it puts a little item in my history saying that I did that. If I add another selection and then I go select, deselect, it's going to add all of that into my history. Okay, I take a pencil or a brush, and on my layer here I just start drawing in this background here. It's going to add brush tool as something I did. I'm going to do it again, fill this all in, and it's added a second brush tool. Now I can go back in my history. It's kind of like undoing back in my history to my original layout for this thing, or I can go forward. As long as I don't make any changes here, I'd be able to keep this kind of history stack the way it was up until my most recent change. If I do happen to go back here, and now that I've got this selection, you'll see that I've got something here. If I say, for instance, I started drawing in here, it's going to rewrite my history accordingly, and it dropped those sort of new things that happened subsequently. Okay, so that's the history palette. That's a useful one. If perhaps, perchance, while you're dragging this around, if you close this, and then you're like, what happened? Where did it go? You can, again, like I said, you can reset it, or you can find all of the window palettes in here. So if I go down and I click on history, it'll come back, and then I can dock it wherever I prefer to have it. Now notice that there's a little blue line showing up. That's indicating where my palette is going to dock. So you can see that there's a bunch of different places that I can put it depending on my preference. And I can give it its own full column here if I like. Again, whatever you prefer. Okay, so that's history. We have a selection tool. Now we're going to be doing a lot of selection. Selection tools are really the basis, one of the most powerful things that we can do in Photoshop. So we'll be doing that. But the other thing we'll be looking at is down here on our layers palette. Okay, at the bottom, we've got these guys. These are adjustment layers, and we'll be using these as well. These are some pretty quick tools for just tightening up some of your photos. And then the last one I think is probably pretty important for us is crop. That's the crop tool right there, and that works pretty straightforward. You just you've probably done this on your phone, where you just crop this to the size that you want your image to change to, right? And so say you've taken a photo and you decide you need to, you've got some extra information in that photo and you want to crop it down, that would be how you do this, and then you would click this little checkbox up here to apply that transformation. And you watch your move tool. Okay, so that's a quick interface tour. We'll come. There's a ton more than that, but that's just a quick kind of idea of where things are in Photoshop. And as you progress, you'll start to learn more and get more comfortable with where things are, and you'll kind of get your preferred methods of finding things and working with things. There are multiple ways to do kind of everything in Photoshop. So for instance, you'll see sometimes I'll open a file by going, you download a file out from Flickr or whatever, from your SD card, and I'll go File, Open. This is the most, kind of the easiest way. I just open it, and then I'm going to go to my desktop and grab whatever image I'm looking for. Okay, so I might just go and grab that from here. I can also do things like I can open up my Finder, and from here, where that is just that image we just saw, if I take this and I just drag it right onto, oops, try that again, right onto the Photoshop icon, I can just let go here and it'll open up a new file using that image. And what you'll see here is I've got two files open now. I've got these two tabs. Okay, I'll do this each time we open up a new file. I'll kind of run you through the process from the start to the end, and you'll get better at it as you work your way through these tutorials. Hopefully that's clear. And if you need to, just rewatch this a couple times until you're comfortable with everything you need to know. All right, great.